I don't know about everything I have to say. There's probably a histogram of relevance and interest. Thank you all for waiting an hour and a half to hear me talk. I appreciate that. I think that's the length of one of today's modern movies, unless Peter Jackson did it. So I will strive to be the final battle, and it'd be very interesting and informative. So before I go to the slides, I had a great talk last night. It's the reason that my voice is very raspy, because Charity and some of my friends and colleagues bought me lots of whiskey. I just really want to publicly shame Miles Ward from Google, who didn't show up because he was at Google I/O, and he promised to do so. And yet, that's another reason why my voice is raspy, as I was crying for hours into my pillow. And I finally fell asleep in a tepid, salty, moist pillow because of Miles. He works at Google. So what am I here to talk to you about? Diversity. I'm here to talk to you about diversity. And it's fascinating, right? Because I think at this point, the majority of the people in this audience care about it, right? You give a shit about it. You want diverse groups. You've been sold on it. And yet, we talk and we talk and we talk, and rarely are things done. Not always, or not never, but rarely. So what is the gap? What is the gap? Last night, we talked about this. Some people feel disempowered, maybe because they are part of the majority and they don't feel like they have a voice. Some people have learned helplessness, which is a term I got from Charity that I love. Maybe you think HR is going to do it for you. Maybe is HR going to do it for you? No, they are not. Maybe recruiting is going to do it for you. You are recruiting. Every single one of you is recruiting for your company in your actions, in your behaviors. Whether it's active or passive, you're doing it. You're bringing people in or you're sending them away with what you do. So that being said, my goal here is to help you understand some anti-patterns, ways that you will turn people away, some shared language, some ideas to bring people in, and I'm going to use the buzzword of the conference, which is a good word, empathy. So there's a comedian, you might have heard of, Louis C.K., and I love his idea with empathy, so he talks about women dating men. And he says, he's a very large man, and he says, I don't understand why women would go on dates with men they don't know. If I was a woman, I would be thinking, this guy seems really nice, and I really hope he doesn't rape or kill me tonight. That's empathy, right? That's starting to understand why are people coming into what is considered a majority skeptical, concerned. There are amazing tech people out there that are people of color, that are women, that are queer, that are trans, that are LGBT identified, and if they've gotten to the point where they're badasses at tech, or they're promising badasses at tech, they've already been through the ringer, right? They've already experienced harassment, racism, sexism, disrespect, and all these leave scars. So how can we reduce that skepticism in a real way? That's what I'm here to talk about. When in doubt, laugh. My humor is strange. So what are my working rules when I talk about diversity and when I go about this day to day? Diversity is a goal unto itself. I'm going to talk to you about why companies should do it, because they make more money, they penetrate more markets. But it's a goal unto itself, right? We're all real human beings and we love each other. We do. Assume good intentions. This means that sometimes we will hurt each other's feelings. We will say things that upset people. We will feel scared to talk. If we all assume good intentions, we actually will create an environment where we can share our own fears, and start to talk about things in a real, frank way, which creates a culture of forgiveness, right? You may hurt my feelings. You may use a male pronoun, and admittedly, I'm a little masculine, but I don't like it. But I'm going to forgive you unless you do it 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. In that case, we're going to rumble. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to call people out and engage. Because if you have a culture of forgiveness and you assume good intentions, calling people out isn't a huge, scary thing, right? It's just, you kind of fucked that up. Here's how you can fuck it up less next time. And finally, recognize that privilege and implicit biases are real. And it's hard when people tell you you have privilege. And I do. A lot of us here do. Most of us here do, because we're engineers, right? So we make money. People want us. They want us to work for them. They chase after us. Recognizing that causes our behavior to sometimes not be great, even if our intentions are good, is incredibly important. So I'm going to go really quickly through why diversity in tech matters, because I think most of you already know. But this slide is very important to me because it points out a couple things. One of which is that diversity is two-dimensional. Here we're, of course, talking about nationality, religious background, socioeconomic, race, all of this is great. But every one of you brings awesome diversity to your company. You know, if we look at cultural fluency, if we look at generational savvy, are you a traveler? Have you been in the military? Are you religious in a good religious way? All of this creates two-dimensional diversity, which is actually incredibly important. What does two-dimensional diversity do for a company? Well, 75% of companies that show two-dimensional diversity are more likely to have a marketable idea taken and implemented. 70% of public companies with it are more likely to capture a new market, and 45% of those organizations are more likely to improve market share. Blah, blah, blah. So what is the power, as I just talked about? Why does it help outside of making money for corporations and shareholders? Normalized salaries free up capital. Freed up capital allows for bigger teams, more code pushes, and greater competitiveness. Diverse teams drive innovation, translating to greater market share and new market penetration. And as Mikey said, that can also be applied to healthcare, to education, to things that really can change the world, which is why I talk about wealth redistribution and rebalancing. I don't know if this is a statistic that I sort of banter about, but it's really important. The starting salary of an engineer in Silicon Valley is more than the average family income for an African-American family in the U.S. So think about that right out of college, their entire family. STEM could be the next middle class. It could bring this back into balance. So here's my big idea. This is the idea that we hear about a lot, especially in the open source community, the meritocracy. Meritocracy is broken. It's bullshit. So I have a little diagram here that shows you. So the middle is your project. Let's say it's the Apache Kafka project, for example. We have a governing group, and then we have all these people who want to work on the project or are working on the project on the left. The governing group's job more than anything is to build that contributing team, right? That's what they're responsible for. If they don't reach out, if they don't go to diverse groups, if instead they stay within their networks, within the people that they're comfortable with, they've immediately self-selected and one group's put out of the side. Those people were never pulled in the first place. They're not at the party. So the next thing, the day-to-day beatdowns that happen in the meritocracy. So at this point, let's say you actually are starting to work on a project, you're starting to do some things and get involved and talk to people. Well, you may get hit on and sexualized. You may hear racist, sexist, and homophobic talk in your IRC chat and forums. You may be talked over, talked down to, have your ideas stolen and misrepresented, and you might have other priorities. So you leave. That leaves a smaller group at this point. So then, the governing group's selection criteria at this point is to decide on committers and some of the more involved people leading the group. At this point, they're looking for these three things in what I've seen as the description of an Apache or an open source Apache Foundation project. Looking for people committed enough for the task, matching human attitudes, working well with others, particularly during disagreement. That's all social, right? That's all what makes them comfortable, what feels right to them and doesn't push things too far. And it doesn't mention skills and ability anywhere. So what happens? Implicit bias rules. And so suddenly, this implicit bias is generally an unconscious thing. It's non-malevolent more often than not. These people aren't horrible monsters, but they have biases. And they will make snap decisions created by comfort and affinity. And I'm sure you've all seen this in hiring, right? And you're like, oh, that person just doesn't make me comfortable. Let's just not hire them. It creates a culture of comfort and not diversity. And that leads to a very small group of people that are doing very much similar work with similar attitudes. And the proof is in the pudding, right? So here's the Apache board. No women. Hadoop, 6 women out of 105 committers, 5%. Cassandra, 4%. Subversion, 1%. HTTPD, 2%. I would guess that you realize those are bad numbers. So how do we fix it, right? Well, again, the things I talked about, getting everyone to the party, eliminating the day-to-day beatdowns, and eliminating individual and systemic bias. And if you hear anyone say, well, we have a meritocracy, tell them it's bullshit. It's bad. It's a bad idea, right? It's as bad of an idea as the first person who decided to walk through the mission wearing Google Glass. It's that bad of an idea. So how do we get everyone to the party? Your first and constant job is recruiting, every one of you. Just some things, right? 30% of CS degrees go to women. Yet Y Combinator historically has only a 4% admission rate for women. Why is that? 30% of their applicants were not also women either, so they're not even coming to the party, much less getting turned down. So what is the gap? Well, I think, and I call it out with John, particularly at Etsy. Etsy is a great role model for building a culture. And it started with the executive team saying, hey, we don't have enough women here, and our customers are women. So where is the gap here? So what do? They put in quotas, and tell me if I'm wrong, but these are just quotas I use. But John, let me know if I'm wrong on this. But so this is an example, right, to say, hey, 50% of the applicants in have to be women, and 50% of your hires have to be women. And the same thing with Black, Latino, Indigenous cultures. And tell the team to figure it the fuck out. They will. If they can figure out these really challenging software problems, if they can build these complex architectures, they can figure it out. And they're going to fail. Why are they going to fail? Because there is a dearth of applicants. And that's the other thing, right? I'm sure all of you here are saying, we can't even get our open recs filled at all, much less getting our open recs filled with appropriate quotas. And it's true. There is a dearth of candidates. I would say there is less of a dearth than you might think, but this is one reason that we also have to look at the long game, and the long game is education. The long game is mentorship and internship. There are great organizations starting to do this. Anywhere you as an individual or your company can participate in these programs, in a few years you're going to start getting a much bigger applicant pool. So recognizing there's the short game and there's the long game, and you can participate in both of them, really means that you may not succeed at first, but your numbers will go up. And then at some point you're going to start actually hitting the numbers, and that's amazing. How do we get everyone to the party? Well, you have to change how you go, right? This isn't inbound, this is outbound recruiting. At this point, you have to make it your job to get your organization dedicated to bringing underserved populations in. That means working with groups who are doing this. That means going to meetups, looking through LinkedIn. You can find groups, you can find projects out on GitHub that are designed for women or for people of color because they want to work together. And then just the day-to-day, the networking, the outreaching, it takes work. I've been doing this for about 9 years, trying to build my team of DBAs. I've gotten to the point where in the past 2 years, I've hired about 20 DBAs. 5 of them were women. Very exciting, right? That's still not enough, but that took 8 years of work, reputation building, letting people know and be less skeptical that my organization would cause beatdowns and cause more damage to them. And what if that's not enough, as I said? Mentor and build your own. And this isn't about lowering your standards, right? If you're going to bring in junior folks that with the right soft skills, the right attitude, many people say, well, we can't lower our standards. You're not lowering your standards. You're hiring for attitude, aptitude, and the ability to learn. And that's creating new avenues. So be proud of that. Welcome your new members. Build balanced teams. Encourage collaboration. And if you don't have the beatdowns, Tank Girl will kick your ass. Come on, that deserves more laughs than that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not done. Oh, I'll take the applause, though. It's okay. Have a code of conduct and enforce it. This is an easy one. I know I'm a little over time, but I just want to point this out. O'Reilly did this right. A lot of other people are finally doing this in their conferences. Your businesses should have code of conducts, too. You should be able to point out bad behavior and reference it to this, whether it's a meetup, whether it's in the office, whether it's online or in support. You should be able to reference this and say, you have violated this, and everyone needs to police these. Everyone needs to be proud of them and encourage participation with them. And here's, acceptable doesn't mean overly sensitive. I know everyone gets very anxious, and they also feel like this is a little overly PC, right? Look, we forgive mistakes when intentions are good. Hatred, insults, and anger will get shut down right away, but education, helping people, helping each other is really encouraged. And finally, when you do start to get people in who are isolated, they're not part of the majority, don't isolate them, right? Put them in groups of 2 rather than 1. Make sure they have support and they have mentors that are like them so that they don't feel overwhelmed, tokenized, and isolated. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about implicit bias. I don't know if you know this, but until the 1970s, orchestras were 95% male. So what did they do? They put screens up, and they hid the performers. And women in orchestras went up 25 to 46% instead of 5% in a period of about a decade. We can do that here somewhat. We can eliminate names and pictures from applications so we can test without knowing who the people are. And when we have balanced interview teams, we can then start talking to people, but they have to be balanced. If you don't have a diverse enough team to hold a balanced interview, contract out, grab some people. I'm sure they'd be willing to help you do that. Create collaborative testing and problem solving, and review the test questions and situations that you put out in place for bias. So that's it. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And have a great rest of the conference.